We're now live on YouTube. We're going to start the recording and you guys are on.
Thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everybody. Zachary Karen, I'm the chairman of the Dighton Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm officially calling this meeting to open. It is 7:05 here, Tuesday, May 26th, 2020 at 7:05, held remotely. This is the special meeting for Strawberry Fields, the 40B we have in town. So I'm just going to read the disclaimer that we have on the top of the agenda that we have due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This public hearing will be held remotely with no physical meeting location. Those seeking to provide public input should do so using the method listed below. Video and audio of the meeting will be aired on local TV channel 9 at a later date. A live recording of the meeting will be available on the Town of Dighton YouTube channel, which can be accessed using the link, and it provides the link below. That's www.youtube.com/Town of Dighton. The public input line, we have Carrie Easterday, the office manager for the planning board, currently at Town Hall. She will be fielding any public input calls. So the number for that, and you may leave a voicemail if necessary. The number is 508-669-6431, extension 114. Or if you choose, you may send an email to John Gray, and he is the ZBA office manager, and that email address is the letter J, Gray, at dighton-ma.gov. And please use the subject line in the email, Strawberry Fields Public Input. And please make sure you do include your full name and address for the record. Alrighty, so obviously as we've been doing, if this is your first meeting listening, in lieu of doing a pledge of allegiance tonight, I would just like to take a brief moment of silence in recognition of those lost who are struggling with the COVID-19 or who are going through any kind of hard times right now. So if we could please pause for a moment of silence. Okay, thank you. And once again, Jonathan Gale, I'm very sorry to hear what your family's going through. You know, it's one of those things you don't think it's going to happen until it does. And obviously, there's nothing we can do but just make the best of it. So good luck with everything, John. So
Thanks,
again, we're just going to go right in. Oh, thank you, John. We will go right into the waivers as mentioned last time. But first, I just want to reference those who are on the call attending as members of the public. I have a finger from Carrie. Carrie, are you all right? I saw her. She good? Jonathan, can you see Carrie?
Yeah, she just gave a thumbs up.
Oh yeah, 1 second. Okay, all right. I saw her do one thing, and I saw Andrew walk. Nope. Nope, you're fine. I didn't want to go on in case something was going on.
Oh no, they were
Alright,
just
so-
Table was just checking to make sure everything was good. Sorry.
Perfect.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
I'm sorry.
I'd like to say something, Mr. Chairman. Last week
Oh,
when
sure.
we were doing the
Okay, great.
waivers, we were going over the wording and the verbiage for each waiver for requests.
Yep.
For application requests is the waiver to the above. I really don't think we need to read that line item per waiver, if you know what I'm saying. So every one of them says the application is requesting a waiver, application is requesting a waiver. It's just wasting time.
Yeah, that's fine, Greg. We'll go into that. I just for the record, just state who's here for the public first, and then we can go into that.
Okay.
Is that right? Okay, yeah, I just want to
No,
make sure that
definitely,
everyone just okay. All right, cool. All right, so like I said, Jonathan Gale is on the call tonight because he is not a voting member on the case. He's attending as a member of the public, so I just want everyone to be aware of that. And we have Ryan Eckerson, who is a future zoning board member, and I heard that your letter may have been lost in the mail. Is that true?
I haven't reached out to him on that. Yeah, I did follow up with Ryan. His letter has been sent from the Board of Selectmen, so he should be receiving it soon.
Excellent. Okay, great. And we have Stephen Goulart will be joining the call later after her school committee meeting. I believe we have Attorney Dennis Murphy for the abutter here, former ZBA member Joe Pacheco, and I do believe we do have some members of the Conservation Committee here tonight. I believe I heard Charlie Mello was here. Excellent. Perfect. So those who are attending as members of the public, just as always, please wait until we get to the public input portion of the meeting. And same for those watching at home. Again, we have the email and the call line that you may use to come in. So just a couple very quick housekeeping things before we get going. So Jonathan Gray, if you just want to just fill everybody in on the letter we received from the Stormwater Committee and the Conservation Committee.
So we have not received a letter from the Stormwater Committee. There was a meeting last week discussing stormwater related to Strawberry Fields. There is likely to be a letter coming in from Nancy Goulart on the matter, but once we have something, then we can discuss it. We have received also a letter from the Conservation Commission today. I'm not sure if we're going to be discussing Conservation Commission waivers today or not, but I can read that into the record if you'd like. Or we can wait.
I'm looking at it now. It is quite, I don't want to say lengthy. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not lengthy, but it looks to be about, on my document, anyway, I have about 4 pages. I don't think I feel the need to go through, waste the time reading that right now. And then when and if we do get to those waivers, I think that can be an appropriate time to bring it up. Unless Marguerite, do you feel like that's something that we need to read in right now, or can we wait until we get to that portion?
I guess at this stage, because it just came in this afternoon and Jonathan, you were able to put it up on the website, right?
Yeah, so it's on the ZBA's website under the sidebar, additional links where you can find Strawberry Fields public documents. The most recent document that has been added is the Conservation Commission letter. So members of the public can find it there.
So in light of that, I would say that it would make sense if we get to the Conservation Commission waiver request tonight, we absolutely will need to read it into the record, but otherwise, why don't we all take a little bit of time for the next meeting to digest it, review it, and then we can take care of reading it into the record in the next meeting. I think it should be an agenda item for next meeting. But it came in and you know, that's a factor of us having very little time in between our meetings right now. So it's something we should make sure we cover in an upcoming meeting.
Absolutely. So that
just, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yep,
may,
Sure.
when we do get to that letter, it will have been up for public consumption at that point for quite some time. And as the chair indicated, you know, it's available online. To the extent anyone has any disability that would prevent consumption of that information via online resource or whatever through automatic text recognition and rereading, I was just hoping to avoid another additional reading word by word of more extensive documentary evidence during a public hearing where this is valuable time that we're all dealing with. So is there any way to avoid the need to read that into the record like we've been reading everything? I mean, it basically says they want to protect vernal pools.
It depends on when it happens, Chris. It's going to depend on when we get to it. So if we're able to wait until the next meeting to review and discuss it, then we probably could just do a shared screen and it will be available to the public to take a look at in the interim, as Jonathan has confirmed. So, you know, it may not be necessary to read it into the record if we're able to share a screen at that time.
All right. So, and just before we go into it, just so the rest of the zoning board members know, there's no additional agenda items for this evening. It is just discussing the next public hearing and then public input. So that being said, like, you know, don't worry guys about us having additional things to discuss, just so you guys know there's going to be nothing else once we're done with Strawberry Fields matters. So that being said, Greg, did you want to, any comments from the, I was going to go open up to the board first. So Greg, you had a comment you wanted to make before we get going?
Yeah, I was just looking at all the waiver requests, and then it says the applicant requests a waiver to the above reference search. Instead of having Jonathan Gray read that every time, I think we understand that that's the language. However, now if we get to one waiver and the language is different, read that into the record. I just think it's a waste of our time going through all of this if it's all the same, because it takes approximately, 15 seconds to read that, and we did 35, and we're definitely short on time trying to get to the waivers.
Yes, I do agree, and especially when it comes to this kind of stuff, that I do go on whatever Marguerite says in terms of that. So if she doesn't have an issue with it, I definitely don't. I mean, Attorney Mitchell, how do you feel? I mean,
I think you handled this last time
Greg.
by just having Jonathan indicate when he read it that every single one of the provisions had the same rationale. So I think that's going along with what Greg was saying. You can read the rationale at the beginning, and then to the extent there's something different, we can also read that at that time, but you don't have to read them for everyone.
Okay,
that make
that's
sense,
how that's how
Jonathan?
I felt too.
Yeah, that works. Just on the
And
planning
Greg,
board
does that answer your
comments.
question?
I'm sorry, yes, it does. Exactly what Marguerite
Okay.
stated is pretty much what I was getting at. As long as the verbiage is the same, I don't think we need to keep reading all that.
Okay.
It's not, just so you know, it's not always the same everywhere. So there are a few situations where it's different.
Right. Okay, so that being said, are there any members of anyone else on the board that has any questions or comments before we get going? All right, that being said, we are just gonna go pick up right where we left off. So Jonathan, if you want to start
Mr.
sharing
Chairman.
the screen. Oh, yep,
Mr. Chairman, I do have one thing I want to go over real quick before we get started into all the waivers, and it's pretty much with Greg Driscoll. Mr. Driscoll, I did receive your email on regards to the dumpster corral, and what it's going to be. I feel it's fine. I don't know if you want to take time now or later in the date to explain to what you want to do with the members of the board. But I'm fine with what you had stated you were going to do the dumpster corrals with.
Okay. Just real quick, that I've been asked what we're gonna do for the dumpster corrals for the townhouse units. And just sent an email to Mr. Logan explaining that it's gonna be, dumpsters will be on a concrete pad and enclosed by a fence for screening and with the gate on the front. So that's pretty much what's gonna be proposed for that.
Greg, is that okay with you, or?
Yeah, we're going to be doing, it stated stockade fence, but I believe it's going to be a vinyl fence. And just, I'm confident that's what Bishop's doing throughout the whole project. So I'm pretty sure that's what we're going with. But I just wanted to make sure, because that was one of the things I asked the last meeting to be brought up was if me and Mr. Driscoll could get together. And Greg did reach out to me, but I wasn't able to send them off an email. And I just wanted to follow up that I'm fine with it as long as the rest of the board members are.
Okay. All right, that being said, Jonathan, you may go ahead, pick up where we left off. Unfortunately, my internet, my computer's a little spotty. My phone's fine. I just can't bring up the waiver on my end right now. It's going a little slow. So if you want to just remind us where we left off, I'm trying to pull it up now.
We are working off of the planning board's document still, correct?
Correct, yes.
With their recommendations along the side.
Yes, correct, yep.
So let's see. Looks like we covered waiver 31 already.
Yep.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong. So that means 32 would be where we pick up.
Right.
Yeah, my internet's a little lagging, so I'm trying to pull it up, but I believe so.
Mr. Chairman, number 32 is where we start now.
Perfect, okay. Then we have some double confirmation on that. Jonathan, whenever you are ready, sir, go right ahead.
Sure. So waiver 32, section 4212, provision shall be made by the applicant satisfactory to the board for the proper projection of streets or for access to adjoining property, if any, which has not yet been subdivided. In the alternative, the board may limit or prohibit the projection of streets to adjoining property where such action is in the public interests. No waiver comment on that from the planning board. Section 4224, waiver number 33, no street jogs with centerline offsets of less than 125 feet shall be allowed. The minimum centerline radii of curved streets shall conform to the following: collector streets 300 feet, secondary streets 150 feet, minor streets 125 feet. Planning board waiver is deny. This waiver request has public safety implications. The high density and implicit population reflected by this application makes road width a critical component of a safe community. Studies by traffic and public safety experts should be obtained to aid in the consideration of this waiver request. And waiver 34, section 4230 on width, the minimum width of streets shall conform to the following: collector streets 60 feet right of way, 30 feet pavement, secondary streets 50 feet of right of way, 24 feet of pavement, minor streets 40 feet right of way, 20 feet of pavement. The applicant requests a waiver from the 60-foot right of way and 30 foot of pavement for collector streets and 50 feet right of way width and 24 feet of pavement for secondary streets to 40 feet right of way width and 20 feet of pavement. Where this is a high density project, we are looking to implement traffic calming features, including 20-foot travel lanes with 1-foot Cape Cod berms. And the applicant requests a waiver under 40B. The planning board comment is denied. This waiver request has public safety implications. The high density and implicit population reflected by this. It's the same comment as on the last one. So those are the three that we're working on right now.
Okay. So this is kind of the first time really going into details regarding this specific type of material. So what does anyone on the board or Marguerite, do you have any direct comments to that?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yep.
Greg, you're muted, Greg.
I believe 32 and 33 have been answered by the applicant's letter that we've gotten from the fire department for apparatus, to Tom Ferry from the town on the width. Like I stated, those two things I feel are fine. I don't know if Marguerite has anything on it, but I'm good with those.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's obviously if the root cause of their denial was for public safety, if it's something that the fire department has already addressed, then I feel like that's okay, unless it's something else that we're missing or anything else. Marguerite, how do you feel?
So there's different comments that we have for each of these three. So with regards to number 32, yeah. Section 4212, that's just the recommendation we had for that is to address it with the language of replacing the zoning board for the planning board and yep. Making sure that the application of the provision is superseded by the requirements of 40B in the terms of the comprehensive permit. And I'm finalizing that specific language with Attorney Agostino. And I've sent him some proposed language that hopefully we'll have a final agreement on, and I'll be able to read it to you next time. But for number 4224 and 4230, the comment that we would have is that I think, especially with 4224, we're not sure exactly where this is not being complied with. We believe the developer needs to be a little bit more specific, more in line with what they did with 4230 as to where it's not being complied with.
Yeah, I see
Overall,
that.
it may not be a problem that this gets waived as per the plan, but I think it should specify where it's not being complied with. And then with regards to 4230, I believe that the plan actually shows 22-foot travel lanes with 1-foot berm, not 20 feet. So we would want to clarify that that's what's being shown on the plans.
And I believe a lot of these things, like we stated when the developer had the traffic study come out, the radiuses for the fire apparatus. Again, on the believe the only thing he was requesting waiver on was the width of the street. That I could remember from going back. So, I mean, if they want to follow up with that, that's fine too, but I agree. I think that's it.
Mr.
So-
Chairman, if I may.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, I think maybe echoing what Mr. Logan may be getting at is that all three of these provisions reference the geometry of the layout of the roadways. And to have to go back in and take the time to identify where exactly the roadways don't comply with specific provisions of this, where these roadway designs have been reviewed by the board's peer review expert, the board's traffic expert, the applicant's traffic expert, the fire department, the board, and everyone else. This is where we get into these particular provisions. I think the answer is that a waiver is appropriate. On the one that Attorney Mitchell indicated that we were working on the superseding language that would be applicable to administrative provisions, I would note that I don't think this 4212 would be appropriate for that type of language, because this is a plan design provision, and it says that the plan shall provide for extensions of ways or limits of ways, which is a common subdivision theme. When you're subdividing land, the board decides whether you provide access to adjacent land or you restrict access to adjacent land. We have plans that have evolved over nearly a year now that show no extensions. So the answer to 4212 should be, the applicant shall not show extensions. This provides for one of two things: show extensions or don't show extensions. I don't think it's something that remains a bylaw that's enforceable. It's just, what does the plan show? Same thing for 4224 and the next one. So where we get into some of these plan design things, we could have Greg present right now at length on the specific areas of the plans that don't necessarily meet these details. And Peter and Greg could go on about that, but there's no reason to get into that discussion where it's already been had. So these are the types where we've asked for a waiver. It should be per the plan that the board and everyone else has already approved.
Okay. Attorney Mitchell, how do you, is there a way you want to respond to that, or do you understand what he's saying from that? I do know what he means. I just want to just make sure. Yeah.
I do understand what he's saying, but I think he's going to have that comment throughout all of our detail, the next several waivers that we're going to get into, which are more detail specific waivers. And I think the problem that we are going to have in each of these, and this is, I guess, a conversation for the board to decide how they want to proceed, is at no point in time have they actually specified where they are or are not complying with these provisions. Typically, this board has asked that specificity to be provided somewhere, whether it's in writing. It is somewhat done at 4230, but that's one of the few where this actually exists, or somehow it's presented more specifically on the plans. And it's, if you want to have more technical conversation, I'm going to probably defer to Peter Williams at this stage, because I'm not reviewing the engineering of the plans to see this. Generally, this board has said if we're going to waive, for instance, in 4224, if we're going to waive the length of streets that are required, then we're going to know how long are our streets that are in here. And we're going to at least have that understanding, because
That's
so
not a
again,
length issue.
that's up to how the board wants to proceed, if they want to proceed that way. But that is the recommendation that I have, is that they get that information.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Okay. Bishop, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, for God's sake, what difference does it make saying where the width starts being less and where width is going to end being less, where we're going to connect to an adjacent property where it's not? It is just not there. It's the plan. Everybody reviewed it. We beat it to death. We're going to sit down now and spend another two meetings and to discuss this. For God's sake, we've got to move. It's just making sure that we can build the frickin' thing. The plan shows where it's narrower, the dimensions are less, so let's move on. We keep beating every issue to death. Oh, tell us where are we giving you relief from? You're giving me relief so I can build the frickin' thing. Enough is enough.
Fisher, I understand that you're frustrated, but you do know that we can't just gloss these over. I mean,
We're not glossing
what-
it over by any means, by any stretch of imagination. We're not. What we're saying, what Attorney Mitchell is saying, that tell us from where the dimension that's narrower than specifications, from what station to what station. Why? The plan shows it clear that it is 22 freaking feet. So why do we need to say from this station and not saying, showing it on the plan? We're not glossing over anything. Everybody reviewed every single inch of that plan. Why do we need to sit down and re-review it and re-put it in writing where the plan shows it? We can't just COVID or no COVID.
Mr. Chairman, Bisher, if I could just kind of follow through on that. And Mr. Chairman, we're not suggesting to gloss over these. It's perfectly appropriate to identify a planning board standard relative to the geometry of a roadway. For instance, 4224 talks about curvature, okay? 4212 talks about access to adjacent properties. 4230 talks about width. We're not saying don't even look at those, but I will suggest that 9 out of 10 zoning boards do rely just on the plan and their engineers. But where this board wants to go section by section, what we can do is say, okay, is there any concern generally about adjacent properties and access to? The answer is we're not providing access, all right? Waived, proceed per plan, okay? Centerline curvatures or curvature geometries, all right? We've done all the truck turns. We've had the fire chief discuss that. We can look at this provision, 4224. We're not going to gloss over it. Again, many boards do, but rather than gloss over it, let's read it. And if the board, after a year of looking at this plan, has a concern about turning radiuses in any particular area on the plan, then the board can raise that as a concern. Or if Peter Williams has that as a concern, you use the bylaw as a reference for specific concern. Road width, we do not need to engage in a rewriting of the planning board regulation on road widths, and we do not need to identify every station where we might deviate from the 22 feet. I think some of the plan shows what we're proposing. If there's a concern, then what you do is you say, Peter Williams, 4230, do you have any concern about road width? Is there any area where you're concerned about? Can you get in touch with Greg on that? And we can go line by line like that, not rewriting the subdivision bylaws. So that's the suggestion on the table for when we get into some of these technical sections. The burden is on the board, by the way, to identify local concerns. All right. The board shall grant waivers is what the regulations say. The board shall grant waivers to allow for the development of the project. It doesn't say the burden's on the applicant to show in detail the minutia and engage in a rewrite of the subdivision control bylaw. So I think, I I wish I was next to him so I could have stomped on his foot, but I think Bisher is expressing his
I understand.
frustration
Yeah.
in the process
Yeah.
a little bit, and I'm proposing a reasonable accommodation that will accomplish the goal of not glossing over, but at the same time avoid what is a torturous exercise, and where we're going line by line, I don't think we're glossing over anything. So that's the proposal.
If I
So
may,
I get, I'm just gonna say, Peter Williams, if you, since it's time about, for you, if you want to jump in.
yes, I was going to jump in there. I think we're not arguing about the street widths. I think the plan shows, I think that one's fairly straightforward. But there's ones where I think when you talk about 4224, I think the plan complies with that requirement of the planning board. And I think it's the board's wish not to waive requirements that are met. And that's all we need to know.
Mhm.
And I think
Is it the
basically-
board's wish to spend hours going through that exercise where we have the plan in front of us? Okay? If it says waiver to the extent not compliant on this one, I think we have some language for that anyway, but to ask the applicant to engage in the exercise of going through every station to see where we might not meet a radii, where we've spent the money on the review to do the turning tables, to do the auto turn and everything else for safety purposes, it's duplicative. So that's the concern where we come into these plan design elements.
Okay. So, Marguerite, did you have anything else on that, or are you content with Peter
No,
Williams'
I
response
think
to that?
going
I
along
think we
with
can
what
go on.
Peter, so going along with what Peter said, I think that's the same problem that I guess applies to 4212. 4212, they're not asking for there to be any projection into adjoining property, then there's no need for a waiver from that. They're complying with the provision. If it is the case that in 4224, they're complying with the provision, then there's no need for a waiver from that. So at this stage, the recommendation would be to deny the request for a waiver on those two. On 4230, it looks like there is a need for a waiver. We've talked about there being 22 foot travel lanes and 1 foot berms, and everything else I believe they're complying with. And I think that's the extent that we're trying to that the comment was designed to elicit. What part isn't being complied with, what part is being complied with, not station by station, but where is it that the waiver is needed? So if a waiver is not needed, my recommendation to this board is that you deny the waiver request. And I think that's pretty simple at this stage. And I think where there was a request, and this has been provided to the developer, where there was a request for more information to be provided, it was so that that people could learn whether or not a waiver was really needed and to what extent.
We don't comply with 4212. We need a waiver of that.
Peter Williams.
4212 appears to reserve to the board the right to require us to provide access to adjoining property, or they may limit it. So to suggest we don't need a waiver of that reservation to the board just is testament to how if you get caught up too much in the details, you can create problems with these. We need a waiver of that.
Also, 4224, there's a section at the, a few sections where there's less than 125 feet of sideline radius with the, especially in the cottage section on that circular road.
Yeah, but isn't that going to be state private? That wasn't going to be public. That was going to be private road. Cottages.
Yeah, but Mr. Logan, this bylaw doesn't make the distinction. So for ease of use,
Okay.
we're saying
No,
this
no,
is the
I was
road
just following
plan.
up with
You
Greg
know,
said.
that would apply to everything. So we're asking for a waiver because there are certain sections where we don't comply.
Well, my opinion on this is, I mean, if we give you the waiver with conditions, we can always go into the conditions on certain matters, because a lot of this doesn't mean anything to you, but some of it does. And I believe a lot of this has been answered through the traffic study, the fire department, local town highway department. I know Peter Williams and Greg Driscoll have both worked on this. It's been said to me before in this meeting, we're kicking a dead horse here. I'm not saying that there's certain things that need to be stated, but at the same note, I believe this has been reviewed by all boards on the angles, radiuses. I had a question on fire apparatus. I made it clear. Jonathan Gray said he was going to make sure that, I believe Marguerite said that there is a letter from the fire chief saying that the road does meet fire apparatus. That's all I'm concerned with on the certain matters. Again, like the widths, I understand that the bottom of the, again, I'm repeating myself, underneath the road structure is going to be complete. It's just the width of the road that was going to be a little different. So, I mean, if anybody else has any comments on this, you're welcome to step up, but as a member of the board, I'm fine with these three.
Okay, Jonathan, if you want to go right into the next three there.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to table these three? Is that what we're doing?
Table them as, I mean, as in
We're not
what?
gonna
Like, is there,
we're not going to grant them the waiver request. We're just going to table. I'm just trying to fill out my paperwork here.
no,
32,
so
33.
Request.
Marguerite, yeah, Marguerite told me that what she's been doing, that she's going along with all of them, and she is writing the kind of actions like for what needs to be reworded and what needs to and then what her recommendation is going to be for each one.
Okay, and that's something that Chris
But
and her are gonna
I've
do on
only
the
been
side.
doing that based on what I'm hearing the board say. So I have the
Well,
same
yeah.
question as Greg.
Why
I
I'm
don't know
bringing
what
it
the
up.
wish of the board is with regards to all three
That's
of
why I
these.
brought it up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
So we would put
Okay.
the request before the board. The request would be waive subject to approval of the final plan or waive per approved plan. And then just to be clear, in quote unquote waiving these, it's not like, if you waive it at this hearing that it's forever lost to the board. I mean, you still have the right to review the plan and approve the final plan and craft a decision with conditions. And that just speaks to the process, but, we're following the board's lead on this process. But the request is on these three where we're discussing the geometry of the plan and some of the details of the roadway, waive the requirement and make it per the plan.
We're left in a very awkward position if these are not waived, because they, according to your opinion, we don't need them. In our opinion, we do, because we are in violation of actually the three of them in one area or another.
I
So
would
if-
agree that, Bishop, if I may, I think I can help out. I think there's reason that a waiver would be required for the three of these. The provision, the board, it's the 4212 does say a provision should be made. And in this case, it can't be. And the other action would be the board to prohibit it. And I think it's just basically easier on 4212 just to waive it because it's not necessary or pertinent to this project. Hearing from Greg about that the street jog, the requirement for street jogs will be needed, a waiver for that. All the other items in 4224, they will need a waiver. And on the widths, obviously, they will need waivers. So I think the board has to take some consideration that for the proposed development of this project, waivers from these three will be required. And I don't know, Marguerite, I think it just may be easier just to make it specific to the plan approved.
that's what I think. I think so too. So, all right. Anything else? Oh, Margaret, do you have anything or no? Oh, no.
No, I
So,
will take the board's direction on this. I mean, I think you've heard some of the commentary we had. I appreciate Peter's thoughts because many of the comments were coming from his need to have more information. So again, perhaps maybe we should start with any of these technical ones we can maybe have Peter and Greg provide some commentary initially.
First, yep, absolutely. So Jonathan, if you want to, Jonathan Gray, you want to go right into the next three, starting with, I believe it's 42, 44.
So we're not discussing the three we were on any further?
No.
Okay. All right, so 42, 44, waiver number 35. Proposed centerline grades within the right of way shall not be more than 5 feet below or above existing grade unless specifically waived by the board in unusual topographic circumstances. In areas where the proposed grades are below the existing right-of-way grades, the board may require that soil borings or test pits be provided to confirm the seasonal high groundwater elevation. Based on the results of soil tests, subdrain systems may be required by the board. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section due to the somewhat undulating and severe grades of the parcels. Planning board recommendation is denied unless applicant can prove that the need is due to unusual topography or other conditions, and recommendation is sought through the Board of Health. Section 4251, waiver number 36, a dead-end street, whether temporary or permanent, shall not have a length in excess of 600 feet from the traveled edge of the intersecting street to the furthest traveled edge of the dead end street, unless the board specifically waives this provision due to the unusual topography or other conditions. Dead end streets shall have a minimum length of 400 feet. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section per 40B, and planning board recommendation is denied unless applicant can prove same reason as last time. And section 4264, at least 1 week prior to the commencement of any street construction, the Department of Public Works and the planning board shall be notified by certified mail of the intended commencement. The planning board shall, upon receipt of such notification, appoint an agent and instruct said agent to make continuing inspections of the work to ensure the requirements listed below are adhered to. A pre-construction conference shall be held prior to the start of any subdivision construction work. The inspecting agent shall furnish the subdivider with a checklist of steps to be completed. The subdivider shall not proceed with any steps until all prior steps have been signed by the inspector as satisfactorily completed. The completed checklist is to be returned to the planning board. Failure to submit a completed checklist may be deemed sufficient cause for the board to withhold final approval of the roadway construction. And the applicant requests to change the references in the above section from planning board to zoning board of appeals. And planning board recommendation is, since the Board of Appeals is the approving body under 40B, the waiver is unnecessary. It should be noted that highway superintendent must be notified.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
so Peter,
So on the one we were just reading there, the first one.
do you mind just saying the number that you're referring to?
Yeah, I'm just trying to locate it again. Give me a second.
Okay.
Let's see, just flip the page. The first one Jonathan read was what number again?
That would be 4244.
244.
Waiver
Yeah.
number 35.
Yeah, so with that one there, I believe the only thing I had a concern with, which we can do at a later date, put a condition in there that as long as the test pits are done by the third party that we requested at a later date. And 4251, I'm okay with that because I believe we've already done all that paperwork through the design. And number 37, the Public Works, which is Tom Ferry, the Highway Department has been involved on that particular matter, and I'm only looking to the zoning board, and as well as the pre-construction, that's been done with Peter and Greg.
All right, and Peter Williams, you want to go ahead? Do you have any feedback on that one?
Well, I think we would like some idea what we're talking about on the waiver for 42, 44. I mean, are they gonna be below, give us an idea what they're looking at, and then we can waive it for the plan.
Okay,
Greg,
Greg,
I know
I'm-
we looked at this specifically, so Greg Driscoll, do you want to
Yep.
just,
So we did look at this, and for cuts, our deepest cut is about 3.5 feet, which is less than the 5-foot requirement. And our fill, the greatest fill is 8 feet, but that is another one of those issues with the topography. It's right in front of the townhouses, that stretch of road right there. And on
Mhm.
the townhouse side, it meets the requirement, but on the other side, it drops off. So that's that section right there.
Greg, I'm sorry, Peter Williams.
I guess, I'm not too concerned with the 3.5 feet. I mean, we're getting, close to, potential seasonal high groundwater, but, we may not find that out until construction, so we can leave a condition that proper subdrains could be added if high groundwater conditions are encountered during construction. The fill doesn't bother me so much. Just
Okay.
have to be
That makes
properly
perfect sense.
compacted in place.
All right, is there anything else on that then, guys? Greg, do you have anything else on those? Greg, Logan?
Not at this time.
Okay. Marguerite, anything in terms of the language of those, or are you all set?
So I'll just have Peter provide me with language around the condition for 42, 44. And my understanding was that there was going to be some condition language too to address 4251, Peter. Do you agree with that? And then
Yes, I mean, I think they
4264
only
would
need
be
that.
addressed.
Yeah, I think they only need a waiver from that on the cottage roadway.
So the local definition of dead-end street is particular or is unique. And technically, even with the double entrance, I think we are looking for a waiver on that one.
Really?
What's that, Peter?
I said really. I always thought
Okay.
if you had dual access, then you still had, it wasn't considered, that part of the road wasn't considered a dead-end street.
There's a funky definition. And rather than getting into a debate about the
Yeah, we
definition and
can
the
work on that
applicability.
offline.
Yeah, okay. And then on the last one, the comp permit itself includes pre-construction notices and whatnot.
So that one, I was a little confused because the rationale in that actually says you were just looking to transfer planning board for zoning board, which I think we were in agreement with that exchange. And then obviously the other language about the comp permit superseding, et cetera. But is that not the case now?
Don't you meeting? Huh?
There's
Hello?
some background noise there. Hello? Okay, yep.
We're doing it.
I think
Yeah,
there's someone who's
I'm seeing the note in this section and applicant request change reference to planning board to zoning board. Yeah, that actually is not the process we were anticipating when you get into certified mailings and whatnot. I think the idea was that the zoning board would be doing pre-construction meetings through its agent and pre-construction conferences and inspections we proposed a condition in the comp permit. So this is not the procedure that we would have envisioned. So yeah, that would need to get updated.
Okay.
So this is one where we're asking for a waiver and we've proposed pre-construction site meetings and construction monitoring procedures in the comp permit in lieu of this procedure, which, you know, if the board sees anything in here that they like, that's specific, let us know, but otherwise, there are conditions in the proposed permit that would address these issues.
Okay, so Marguerite, is this anything that you feel like that you need to address offline, or?
It's just a little, I think the reason that we're kind of talking about this as much as we are is that the request is a little different than what the submission was, but I believe that maybe we could address this, Chris, as we did with one of the prior ones that Greg was concerned about, which is that I'll kind of keep that highlighted and we'll take a look at it again when we review those conditions.
Conditions, that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, Jonathan, you're up.
All right, okay.
Sorry about that.
Sure. I was just waiting for the cue there. Thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
my audio, my headphones cut out. We're good.
Okay. Section 4310, design standards, waiver 38. All stormwater management systems shall be designed in accordance with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Stormwater Management Policy and the Dayton Board of Health Stormwater Detention Retention Regulations. All stormwater management and infiltration systems shall be designed and certified by the Massachusetts Registered Professional Engineer. Marguerite, since this is stormwater, it looks like the next couple are stormwater. Do we want to potentially move on from these because we're potentially expecting some communication from the stormwater?
Did you get any kind of letter
committee?
from Stormwater?
They were
Jonathan,
planning
did
to
you get
send
any
us
letter?
something.
We haven't got anything yet. No.
I mean,
Greg,
these
I
are
believe
planning
answer
board
the question
that,
regulations.
Go ahead,
These
Marguerite.
are
Say
planning
that
board
again, Marguerite.
regulations. They're planning board regulations, so I
Okay.
think that I would still continue to address them. The Stormwater Committee was talking about their own stormwater regulations.
Okay.
So the planning board was just saying that they were going to seek their advisement before they provided their comments. Is that what they mean by that on their comment there? Recommendations sought by the Board of Health and Stormwater Committee.
Yeah, that's the same for the next one as well.
Yeah.
And also it looks like 41 potentially as well.
Can you run that by me again? What are we saying on these three?
So it seems like they're planning board regulations, but my thought was that they look to be stormwater related, and I know that we may or may not be expecting something from the Stormwater Committee relative to these. But I'm
Well, let's
happy to
talk
just
about-
proceed.
Let's just talk about 4310. I don't think there's any reason that this project shouldn't comply with this, Mass DEP stormwater standards.
I agree with that,
They
but
have
if you
to-
read into it, it says Dayton Board of Health Stormwater Detention Retention Regulations as well, which we're asking for
All
a
right,
waiver
then we
on.
then we
So,
modify that. We modify.
okay, that's actually fine. We can take care of that one quickly.
Because they're gonna meet the DEP and EPA anyways.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. The only thing we're asking for a modification on there or need one. I mean, frankly, waiver's easier, but we've been through that. We're asking for delete the section that says Dayton Board of Health Stormwater Detention Retention Regulations.
I agree with that. Marguerite, you okay?
Yep, yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
Great. All right, 4312, waiver number 39, location of detention, retention, and infiltration basins. Detention, retention, and infiltration basins shall be located on a separate parcel and shall not be located on a lot to be conveyed for building purposes. Such parcel shall not be less than 30 feet of frontage so as to eliminate the need for easements across lots to reach said detention basins. No detention, retention, or infiltration basin shall be located within 50 feet of any perimeter lot line, being those lot lines that existed prior to the submission of the subdivision application. Same recommendation from the planning board on that one. And I'll proceed on to section 4313, maintenance guarantee, which is waiver number 40. A maintenance guarantee for all storm drains, culverts, swales, detention basins, and related facilities may be required as referred to in section 3500. This may be executed as a condition before final approval of a definitive plan. And planning board recommendation is deny. Applicant should establish a security for the maintenance and care. Do you want me to stop here, or I can proceed to 41?
No, I think is it the same reasoning, right?
I think we should stop there because there's a
Oh, okay.
couple things on that.
That's fine, because my internet, so I can't pull it up on my end, so I'm going by what's on the screen there. So that's fine. Go ahead, Greg.
Greg Logan, you're muted right now.
I just don't want to do too many stormwaters without, because there's like, they're very detailed, and I would like to go over each of the stormwaters individually versus doing 3 at a time, because of the verbiage. I thought this could be answered with Peter, I believe, on certain things, like on 4312, and I believe they have on another one. They're also going to have the homeowners committee. They're going to have that in there for the maintenance of the above ground storm basins and all that stuff. I just want to make sure before we go too far that we bring that up now, but I believe that's being taken care of.
Okay, Peter, do you think you could provide a adequate response to these?
These 3 right now,
Yep.
I think basically 4312, we determined, based on the layout and design, that this is how the site has to work. I think we had some recommendations to actually at least establish a minimum setback for detention basins from property lines.
Are they meeting that right now?
The 50, no. They have a number of the basins are pretty close to the property lines.
Okay. So there'll be a condition in that particular on 4312.
Yes.
And then the other one was maintenance guarantee. Didn't we already go over that with the homeowners association? That we're going to have that monies in there for that?
Yes. So the answer to these would be waive 4312, build basins as shown per plan, unless there's a concern about a basin that, in particular, I thought we went into detail on the location and design of basins, particularly ones that were near other properties. So that's been addressed. And then the maintenance guarantee, we could go with the standard language regarding waiver and superseded by the terms of the permit, because obviously, yes, we're going to have guarantees, but they're usually handled by the permit itself, the terms of the permit.
So Marguerite, do you agree with that? Rewording there, excuse me.
I mean, I will defer to Peter Williams on the 4313 comment, but I don't have a problem with that conceptually. with what Chris just said. In terms of 4312, I would still, I guess, want to hear Peter's thoughts on, he's saying that there should be a minimum setback. I'm not sure if you know off the top of your head what that's being shown as, Peter, but I think
No, it
that's
should
your,
be just a condition that, I mean, this is what they said they need, and we'll just keep it at that, the minimum they'll maintain per the plan.
right? So, yeah, is there a minimum number that you believe should be referenced here?
I
Or are
don't
you
know
just
off the
saying,
top of my head. I
say
think
as
it's-
per the plan?
Right. We can
Does
just say as
Greg
per the
Driscoll
plan.
have an idea what the minimum number might be?
I can look that up, but
I mean,
Should we-
I'm looking, so, Peter and Greg, and this is where you can run into trouble with these bylaws. I mean, it just says the basins. Does that include any grading associated with a basin? Does that include the interior of the basin? The plan shows grading in close proximity to the lot line, even though it's the exterior grading on the basin. So
Mhm.
this is an as per plan, unless the ask is to redesign all of our basins, which I'm
No,
hopeful that's not the
no.
ask.
No, that's not the ask,
So as per plan.
as per plan.
I'm okay with that.
Greg, Greg or John, can you hear me? I'm having technical difficulties. My sound is not working. I can't really hear that well.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
You
we
can hear me? Okay. I don't know why, but I just have.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to proceed reading the next one, or do you want to figure out?
That's fine. I'm sorry. I just have kind of strange to hear. I don't know why all of a sudden my sound is very low. I'm just going to, since you guys can hear me, I'm just going to block my video just so you guys don't see me filling with the phone. So John, if you want to go ahead and continue with the next one while I just fix my audio, go ahead.
Sure. 4251 waiver 36. I'm sorry. Am I on the correct? I'm on the wrong one here. Sorry.
Should be number 41.
41, correct. Okay. So waiver number 41, section 4314, outlet inverts. If a stormwater facility discharges to a down gradient wetland, the outlet inverts for detention, retention, or infiltration systems shall be a minimum of 6 inches above the highest elevation of the down gradient wetland. And the planning board recommendation is the recommendation should be sought of the Board of Health and Stormwater Committee. Section 4320, waiver number 42. The use of above ground or open stormwater detention, retention, or infiltration facilities is prohibited unless a variance is granted by the Dayton Board of Health. Should a variance be granted, then any above ground or open detention, infiltration, or retention system shall conform to the following documentation for requirements in section 4321 through 4327 inclusive must be provided. And same recommendation from the planning board on that one. Greg, Logan, would you like me to proceed with a third one, or do you want to stop here?
Well, I have I believe I'm good with the 41, but 42, I just wanted to follow up with Peter Williams on stormwater detention. Is there any questions or concerns on that particular thing? I believe we've hashed out a lot of that. I just want to make sure. I know that still stormwater is going to be involved with it. Just didn't know if you had any questions or concerns on 4320.
4320. No, and no.
Okay.
And I think that's, I think they're no longer prohibited. The, what is it? Open water. So that
Yeah.
requirement of the planning board has been voided.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Yes, go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay. Section 4322, waiver number 43. The stored runoff must drain or percolate dry within 24 hours of the end of a steady rain. And same recommendation by the planning board. And then
I think that's
the,
the three.
Nope.
say that again.
I think we hit three.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. We didn't talk about 4314. The outlets being 6 inches above the highest adjacent. I believe the plans appear to comply with that. And that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I think a lot of time we find these outlets are almost at grade or even with adjacent wetlands and they don't drain properly. And I would like to see if this can be, I would, recommend that this be not waived.
Greg Driscoll, can you confirm we comply with that?
There is an area, a basin 4D. Right near that area where we have the culverts going under the road from 4C,
Oh, yeah.
where that is a little bit of a fill area, and we're going right into that wetland with a riprap outlet, and there's another outlet just west of that, I believe, as well, which is not quite 6 inches. You know, it's less, but those are areas where I'm concerned about.
Complying with this local requirement, and there's no DEP requirement on point?
No.
So this is one of those comply with the stormwater management reg design requirements.
Yeah, there's many other areas that we can't comply with that.
No, I understand that. I mean, is there, I think I understand the problem with the culvert under the roadway access. How far off? You have some gradient down,
So I'm looking at it right now, and also the outlet from basin 4B, a 15-inch pipe comes in at elevation 50, and it's the 50 contour is maybe 5 feet away or so, 8 feet away. So it's above it, but it's not completely above it. I'd have to see what the wetland flag A11. I'd have to see what the ground shot is on that to confirm.
Peter, if this is,
I'd like to leave that in and then try to attain that as much.
well, so this is one of those where, we'd request a waiver, but then could we state to the maximum extent practicable? And that way, when he's putting the final design together, if he calls you up and says, hey, this area just can't squeeze it in, and, we're showing a basin there, that should be something that we can get a waiver.
I would go with that, but I like right now on that path, but I would actually just like to follow up with Greg to discuss that offline.
Okay.
Is that all right with you, Marguerite?
That's fine, Peter. I think it's consistent with your recommendation.
Okay.
Any discussion on 4322?
I'm back, Jonathan, by the way, so you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So
Peter Williams, do you have anything on 4322?
That is a local regulation. The stormwater regs require 72. The planning board has typically required all the subdivisions in town to drain within 24 hours.
And that comes into a density issue. So these next 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 ones kind of dovetail into a density issue where the subdivision rules and regs require larger land area for the basins, which is kind of contrary to the spirit of 40B, where we're trying to get a denser project. And we do meet the requirement of stormwater management, the 24-hour.
We need 72 hours.
72 hours, I'm sorry. Yep. Thank you.
I'd suggest that we take the next couple technical ones offline table, and Greg and I can work those out so we can work, move on to other ones that we can.
Sure. Peter Williams. So if you want to give us this, a number in which you think, so like if you're looking at the list, up to what number do you feel like you want to discuss offline, just so we know where to pick up?
Probably up to 50.
Okay.
Inclusive
so-
of 50, it looks like.
Thank you, John.
50.
So I'll resume at 51 then.
Yeah, I will say that.
Perfect.
49, I think, goes in with the waiver condition on the cuts, and it may be something we want to hold in, that if there is drain, seepage issues, that sub drains can be required.
I also, Peter,
Yes.
I just want to be clear on your recommendation for the above ground, the above ground retention systems. Because,
Well,
I
you
mean,
were the
I
one
know
that
there is a
pointed-
memo that said these are no longer prohibited.
Well, you were the one that pointed out the 7/28/2011 memo to me. So where do you believe that stands in a legal standpoint?
So I haven't worked, I don't know how the planning board has gone about enforcing this regulation since then. That memo stands there and says it's no longer prohibited. These are no longer prohibited.
I think we've had 0 below ground detention basins in the past 12, 13 years.
And has the planning board ever issued a waiver of this condition under that?
No, just by plan.
So they've all shown above ground and they've had this language in there.
That's correct.
I'm,
What is
I
their,
mean-
I'm sorry, let's go back and look at their recommendation. So they're suggesting it be sought by the Board of Health or the Stormwater Committee. I mean, the Board of Health has a memo that they said they don't prohibit these, so. I guess I'm just not sure.
for the sake of clarity and Bisher's sanity, can we please conclude that exchange with a waiver of this particular section, as we've been showing the basins as designed for over a year now? If
And
there's a
the
memo that's
regulations still-
suddenly superseded, if they change their policy, we are showing above ground and open stormwater detention. That's been our proposal from the beginning. So can we just have a waiver of this to be clear? What's the board's pleasure on this one?
Yeah, the reg still exists in the regulations, even though it's a memo.
Greg, what do you think? I mean, if there's no, just for my sake, define memo exactly, just so I understand what you mean by that.
It was a memorandum created by the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen, indicating that above ground systems were no longer prohibited. There was an issue years ago where there was a dispute between this entity, the planning board, and the Board of Health over this, and it has since resolved itself. And I don't think that anything's changed. So I just want to know how the zoning board wants to proceed in this regard. I mean, I understand why they asked for it because the language is there, but I also know that this language has not been enforced for any subdivision, 40B or otherwise, since that memo was issued. So I just don't know which route you all want to go.
So to me, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I feel that Mr. Williams has worked on the planning board for a while, and he's understood the way things have been going, and the planning board has brought in the design. This has had the above ground systems going through. I think, my personal opinion, I'm okay with this, with maybe some verbal language for a condition on it, but I'm fine with it. This is the way it was designed. There is other developments that have above ground systems right now, if that's what I'm understanding is where the concerns and questions are. Mr. Williams stated that the planning board has done this in the past, since this is even their bylaw. I think we can either table this and let the engineering deal with this on another time and figure it out, but I believe by listening to Mr. Williams, this has happened before.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
what is the risk in waiving it? What will the town lose?
That's what-
What's the problem?
That's what I was going to say, Greg. Yeah, Greg Logan. Why do you feel the need to table it? I think it can be waived.
I agree with it. Was good. I'm
Okay.
just stating that this print has been in front of all boards.
Yeah.
It's been designed this way.
Yep.
And again, like I taken what Mr. Williams states pretty seriously because this is his specialty.
Yep.
And he stated in his comment that this has happened in the past, and this is what they've done, even though that's the bylaw with the planning.
Okay.
So I really don't know what the big concern is.
Okay. So, John, you can go ahead into the next one.
That'd be 51.
Correct. Yep. So if you want to do 51 and then I do up to 53, that's fine. 54.
Sure. Section 4360, waiver number 41, certificate of occupancy. No certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any dwelling unit in a subdivision until the stormwater management system is fully functional. Planning board recommendation is approval should be sought by Board of Health and Stormwater Management and Building Commissioner. Waiver number 52, section 4430, street lighting. Street lighting shall be provided for those locations where the planning board, following consultation with the Selectmen and Municipal Light Board, recommends that the town maintain lighting. Facilities shall be provided in accordance with the Municipal Light Department's specifications. Planning board recommendation is deny inadequate lighting creates multiple safety concerns such as accidents, injury, crime, etc. The placement of lighting should be shown in the plan at the specification of the Dayton Electric Light District. And 53, waiver number 53, section 4511, required locations. Sidewalks within street right-of-ways shall be provided as follows. Collector streets, both sides. Secondary streets, one side. Minor streets, one side. Planning board recommendation is deny. The density of this development emphasizes the need for safety purposes of sidewalks to protect pedestrians from vehicular traffic implied by the density.
Okay. Peter Williams, want to go first on these then?
I think this. I think these should be about 4430 and 4511 should be per plan. We've agreed on the sidewalks and I think we've discussed the street lighting, so I think, we should stand on that. The certificate of occupancy is more of a legal issue, and I'll leave that to Marguerite.
Okay, so Marguerite.
So I guess my question would be, is there a reason this isn't able to be met? Are you not going to have your stormwater system fully operational before you get a certificate of occupancy?
Might it make sense to do it per phase?
Yeah, so not for the entire site. So we proposed phases. And, what is fully operational? Is it with a closed certificate of compliance from the Conservation Commission? Is it, with stabilized plantings? Generally on a project of this size, these types of conditions don't necessarily translate. So the construction monitor keeps an eye on whether or not something is operational. I think if there are specific areas that we want completed, Or if we want to talk about, like Greg said, per phase, or if we
Mhm.
want to talk about, relative to the cottage area or relative to the townhouse area. And with respect to the single families, maybe it's with respect to the particular lot in question. So I think it's more of a phasing issue.
So why don't we just work on language that we can add to this
Yep.
and make that clear?
So when you say add to it, that's one of those situations where we can craft a condition in the permit based on this type of requirement, which is not uncommon, to have a requirement that you finish site infrastructure before a certificate of occupancy. But why don't we waive this and we'll have a condition in the permit? That way it's in one place, it's clear, we're not duplicating efforts, and we don't do any conflicting requirements. And as a matter of fact, I think the draft permit has this type of language in it.
Do you
Let's
guys,
say you have to anyways, right? So.
you guys pay money for every, does it cost you money for every waiver you grant? It seems like, I mean, we can cover every angle, but it's like your zeal to make sure that nothing is waived is mind-boggling to me.
We need, yeah, no, I understand, Bishop, but we need to make, if Marguerite has a question on the language of it, I'm not just gonna just let it go either. I mean, I need to make sure that anything, we can't just say, well, the wording seems weird, we're not sure on something, let's just waive it. I do understand your frustration, Bishop, but, no, it does not cost us per waiver, no, but I also can't just, go by just like, we'll let it go. based on just
Mr. Chairman,
language.
we're not at all
Everybody-
suggesting that. We're
Mr.
not at
Chairman,
all
I don't think
suggesting
Anybody will
that.
accuse you of that. I don't think anybody will accuse you of just granting.
Not even close.
Th-
What we're saying
no,
is it's appropriate to craft a condition based on that waiver. That's what the 40B regulations say, that the board can look to the subdivision rules and regulations and craft conditions based on those. And traditionally, that's what's done. So we're to make sure that, we're not creating conflicting requirements or multiple layers of requirements. We can look at this, and certainly no one is glossing over this, but let's look at it and make sure there's a condition in the permit that talks about occupancy permits relative to the completion of stormwater management infrastructure and other infrastructure. So that's what we're asking for.
Okay, so Marguerite, you said you did want to be about adding to the language, and then is that clear for what you want to happen?
It's up to the board if they want to go the route of a condition, which seems to be what Attorney Augustino wants to be the path that you take, or if you just want to work with this language right now. So my suggestion is that either way accomplishes the same thing. The concern I have with constantly saying, let's treat this as a condition, let's treat this as a condition, is that we're going to get to the conditions and then we're going to now be in the same conversation, except we've just delayed it. So I'd rather work with this language right now.
Okay, well, if we get to the conditions then, and we're going to have this as a non-waived bylaw, then I'm deleting the entire section on occupancy permits. If that's how we're going to go about it, it can be in one place, either in the bylaw or in the permit. So frankly, I think it's more efficient to put it in the permit, because then we can craft the appropriate language versus having to go back and refer to the bylaw. You have it all in one document in the comprehensive permit rather than unwaived conditions in a bylaw, in multiple bylaws. And I would respectfully suggest that the way I'm suggesting is what's required under the 40B regulations and what is traditionally done in most zoning boards I work with.
Yep.
I'm okay with that.
I am too. I'm just looking at it. Yep. Okay, so then we just need to go to, what was it, 53, John? That we need to discuss now?
I already read 53, so I'm moving on to 54. now.
Right. Yeah, no, I know. I didn't know if there's anything on 53 that we want to discuss first. About the sidewalks within the right of ways.
I believe that's all
Are
been
we
done
good?
through the engineering already, traffic study, again, repeating ourselves on that particular case.
All right.
53, I feel
So-
that way, and I feel the same way with 52 with the street lights. We've already got a design, discussed how far apart they are, and I feel comfortable with that one as well.
So Jonathan, yep, so you can go from 54.
Well, can we hold 1 second? I would just like to stay
Oh.
on 51 on the certificate of occupancy. Let's just hash this out right now, which is that I'd agree that the stormwater management system has to be completed by phases if the project is built in phases, and that the basins and have to be stabilized, at least temporarily, to prevent erosion of the slopes, and that any downgradient portion of the stormwater system, the portions of a stormwater system downgraded from a phase have to be stabilized too, even if they're in a separate phase.
Sounds like a
Okay.
perfectly reasonable condition, and it's section G in the draft permit that we can include those types of requirements.
Okay. So then go ahead. So go ahead, John, you can go ahead now.
Sure. Waiver 54, 45, 20, grass plots and slopes. Embankments outside the shoulders and swales shall be evenly graded and pitched at a rate not steeper than 2 or 2 to 1 in cut and 3 to 1 in fill. The board may require such banks in all other disturbed areas adjacent to the traveled way to be loamed and seeded grass, or after consideration of surrounding vegetation and terrain, to be blended with such wood or natural surroundings as exists, with plantings chosen accordingly. Planning board recommendation that there should be recommendations sought by Board of Health and Stormwater Committee. Waiver number 55, section 4550, driveways, entrances. Driveway entrances shall be constructed and graded so that to prevent drainage onto public ways. Driveways at intersections and cul-de-sacs shall be spaced so as to facilitate snow removal. Planning board recommendation is deny. This waiver request has public safety implications. The high density and implicit population reflected by this application makes driveway entrances a critical component of safe community. And waiver 56, section 4563, monuments shall be installed at each lot corner along the street and as necessary to locate any easements to be deeded to the town. And planning board recommendation is deny. Boundary markers clearly define the boundaries and provides a necessary tool to locate any easements to be deeded to the town.
All right, Peter Williams, you go ahead first.
Okay. I think this is kind of a safety issue where you don't want the embankments outside the shoulder being too steep. A question is, I'm not sure, I've reviewed the plan that this waiver is needed. Greg, have you looked at this?
It's behind the townhouses.
Yeah, I have looked at it, and there are a couple of spots where we're showing a riprap slope.
Mhm.
And a wall.
Okay, is this adjacent to the roadway?
Yes. And we're showing a guide rail along it. It's near Basin 1A.
Hello?
Someone's on,
Hi,
you're
John, how
not,
are you?
you're not muted. Can someone just make sure you're muted,
Good.
please?
I got it all set, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sorry.
So yeah, near Basin 1A is a retaining wall that we're showing with the guide rail.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other scattered spots where we're showing a riprap slope. Just typically 2 to 1.
So you feel as though this still needed, Greg?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree that they've addressed this. I mean, it's in some places you can't avoid it and you have to put in the guardrails.
Yeah, wherever we have a steep slope, whether it's riprap or a wall, we're showing guide rails.
Is that behind the townhouses as well, going across that backside where the walkway was gonna be?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, this condition applies to, slopes and embankments along roadways. Not-
well, that's gonna be a public walkway, if I'm not mistaken. Am I
Yeah.
correct with that?
Yeah, it also wraps around next to the roadway from
Yeah.
behind the townhouse up to.
I'm okay with it as long as we just get the language that says of those few miscellaneous ones.
Yeah, and as long as we have guide rail protection and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right, Marguerite, anything on your end before we go on?
No, that one was, Peter Williams. I think that was a comment that we needed to have discussed.
Okay.
But you're still gonna address the other two, right?
Yep. So we're looking at the monuments.
Driveway entrances now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. I see it. So and then Peter, that's what you were saying. Is definitely a big impact on public safety. Is there another way that we can either adjust the wording on that one, or is there more clarification that you need?
I think we just have to make an exception or something that waives that requirement to allow them to install guardrails. This is number 54.
Yep.
Now on the driveway entrances,
No, I think Jason went back to 54, I'm understanding.
Okay.
Yes. So Marguerite, you want me to give you some language on that?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay.
okay, on 55, we do have the driveways grading towards the road so that we can capture the runoff into the drainage system and treat it. So I think that's the way we typically like to design subdivisions, capture the asphalt runoff and treat it in the system.
Peter.
This one, I guess I would like to get some input from the Stormwater Committee on this one, because I know in some towns that they're pushing to get more, maintain groundwater levels by, diverting driveway entrances into grass areas, which could be done in this project with just some minor sloping of the driveways.
Okay.
These are also smaller lots with shorter driveways than the typical lot that might be built in Dayton. So we could consider that as well.
Okay.
Okay. So then the next one would be the monuments. Peter, do you have any comments on that one?
Well, these monuments, I mean, I think any easements should be definitely, granted to the town, have to be identified, and that's a typical requirement. I'm not sure we have one on this project, and it may come up. I think the main purpose of this is to ensure that neighbors have clear understanding of, what's their property line, where they can build, and not to, obstruct onto the abutters' properties. Some monumentation has to be accomplished, especially in the single lot area where you have a lot of small lots.
So Peter, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
I think that we should consider retaining this. I'm not sure how the applicant feels about that.
Bisher, what do you normally do in Dayton? So, I think Marguerite indicated that you've done this on your other projects.
Yeah, we do the front lot corners. That's fine.
So if we specify either through amendment or a waiver and a condition that the front lot
Yep.
corners,
Well, that's what it reads, Chris.
I mean, it says each lot corner along the street and as necessary to locate easements to be deeded. So if it's along the street, okay.
Yeah, the
So
next one
that,
is for the
that
rear
states
lots.
front, okay. So Bishop, if you're okay with that along the street,
That's fine.
What, how about I read the next one and that'll sort of wrap up our planning board ones. It's sort of
Okay.
related. Section 4564, waiver 57, 2 major rear corners of each lot shall be marked with iron rods. Iron rods shall be 3/4 inch iron rods set to a depth of not less than 18 inches below finished grade and shall be set flush to the grade. And planning board recommendation is deny. Markers clearly define boundaries and will aid in any potential future disputes of property lines.
Bishop?
I'm not gonna do that. We'll do the front corners. I'm not gonna do that. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I should be off this.
Well, if it's not consistent with what you've done on the other subdivisions in town, I don't think it should be
It is not consistent.
good. So then it should be waived then, and we should keep it consistent.
Peter?
I'd ask Marguerite first. I want to just look at something on the plan.
Okay. Marguerite, go ahead then. While Peter's getting the plans.
Well, I think I guess it's more of a preference. The analysis and the reasoning for why it's needed was stated by the planning board. So it's really up to you whether you want to require this of the applicant or not. I don't believe it's been waived. I'm trying to look at that in other cases, but
Greg Logan. Okay,
I have a couple things, like a lot of these houses, if you look at the size of the lots, you look at the size of the house he's putting on it, to put an addition on it, you're not going to be able to. There's only very few lots on here that I see that anything could possibly be done for that. And I think pointing the front is fine. The only concern, one place I do have a little concern about is over in Carriage Parkway and that backside out there. I think that's what Country Parkway, whatever that road is over there. We're leaving a buffer. I remember him saying that and all that stuff, but like he wants to pin all the front. I want to say that's what we did at the Pines.
I'm looking at the Pines right now, actually. So give me a moment to look at it.
Okay.
In Arborcrest, you developed revised language and identified where you wanted them to put boundary markers. I don't see, I think what you were waiving, it looks like you were waiving either 4563 or 4564, but usually it's been 4563. I don't actually see 4564 being waived ever, other than in Arborcrest. You specified, you had a pretty lengthy rewrite of that. And which lots. With
Was that
front
Marguerite
corners
because
versus
of
iron
near the abutters? Maybe is that where the concerns become?
I mean, Arborcrest is going back many, many years now, but it looks like you had several lots that you would identify where you wanted front corners and iron pins, or rear corners and iron pins, or front corners and the front bounds and iron pins in the rear. So
When we did the Pines, I believe Bishop was only required to do the fronts though. Am I correct on that?
So the Pines, you actually waived 4563, not 4564. So I believe that would mean he would have had to do all 4 lots. But he didn't permit the Pines.
Okay.
So it's possible that it wasn't constructed that way, but because it was meeting 4563, maybe the building inspector at the time was comfortable with that. And Stony Ridge.
Peter, you all set? Oh, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, I think I think they're gonna need to actually monument where they're gonna subdivide this property off from the other one when they do the subdivision. Are they now the rear property, is that subdivided off yet, or are we holding off on that?
They are already separate lots.
Separate lots, have you identified the, set bounds or monumentation to identify the division of the properties?
They're already divided.
Yeah, but if in the field, have you put out bounds?
I haven't done anything, no.
Okay,
but
so I think that they'll need to do that. They have some areas where they're doing work close to the sidelines. So I would rather develop a condition where we might need to, and where areas where we need buffer zones. I think we need enough monumentation to identify the sidelines, protect and buffer the adjacent properties with monuments. They won't be at every, lot corner, but enough
Right.
someone a surveyor to come in and do the line and then say, prior to construction, we can just, throw some flags along that area and say, yeah, you can't go any closer than this.
I can understand that. I can get along with that.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'll have to work up a condition and I'll run it by Greg and, the group and see how it works out, okay?
Okay.
All right, so Jonathan, do you want to quickly, my internet is still a little slow. If you want to just
Sure.
remind,
Let's just do the
the
first-
number. What's that,
Yeah, go
Jonathan?
ahead,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, if you just want to quickly, just one more time, just run off the public input number, just so we can just
Sure.
remind everybody. And then,
Yeah, sure. So public input for anyone who's watching at home and wants to provide public input, you can call Carrie Easterday, Planning Board Office Manager at 508-669-6431, extension 114. And you can also email me at the public input email, which is jgray@dighton-ma.gov. And we'll be taking public input relatively shortly, so submit your comments soon. Mr.
Carrie,
Chairman,
do you have anything yet? Oh,
Nothing as
okay,
of
go ahead,
yet.
Okay.
Okay,
All right,
Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah,
Any
I've
emails?
got nothing. I'm going to proceed to 58
Okay.
and 60.
By all means, yep. Yep.
Sure. So Town of Dayton zoning bylaws adopted by the town October 15th, 2018. Waiver 58, section 2610 general. Waive all of the dimensional and density provisions of these sections and allow reduced lot dimensions as shown on the plans. The planning board comments on each of this one and the next two following is deny. This waiver request has public safety implications. The town's rural character ought not be sacrificed unless exempted by this bylaw or statute. Waiver 59, section 2620, table of dimensional requirements, see Appendix B, to waive all of the dimensional and density provisions of these sections and allow reduced lot dimensions as shown on the plans. And waiver 60, section 2630, special dimensional regulations, to waive all of the dimensional and density provisions of these sections and allow reduced lot dimensions as shown on the plans.
Okay. Peter, is there anything that we have there for you? Do you have any interest in commenting on? Excuse me.
No, I do not, Jason. Sorry, I muted myself.
Zach, sorry.
Yeah, there.
All right, and then Marguerite, do you have anything there?
No, other than to state that at times the zoning board has looked to establish some type of a minimum threshold for purposes of, acknowledgement of to what you're less so of the size of the lots, but more about what do you want the setbacks to be for the houses constructed. So I don't know if that's something you want to do through the waiver process or through the condition process. But
Greg Logan, what do we typically do for that
The condition process, I feel. that's what-
condition?
Yeah, How about Peter Karen? Does he have anything on this one?
No, not right now. I think it's something that we can address during the conditions if we need it necessary.
Thanks.
Okay. Mari, is that okay with you? Move on.
It's happened you've done it both ways, so
Okay.
I think that it's something that perhaps the developer, I don't know, have you drafted that in the conditions yet, Chris?
No, I would point out sheet 24 of 25 in the plans shows a typical house lot and layout for subdivision. So I generally don't identify minimum layouts or minimum setbacks. It's not, I have done it before, but where we show a typical lot layout, I think this is as per plan, since Greg's plans do show on that sheet a typical setbacks and side yard setbacks and whatnot. So you can see here.
Okay. So we'll just keep going then. It's about 8:50, so we have a time to move on to the next group, John, whenever you're ready.
Well, just so,
Sure. No.
I just want to let you all know, it appears that they're 20 feet.
Excuse me.
It
Go ahead.
doesn't look like it's to the center line of the road, so 20 feet off the lot line in the front, 10 feet side yard setbacks, and 20 feet in the rear.
So I'll proceed now on waiver 61, section
Yep.
2820, applicability. Areas of land subject to the jurisdiction of the planning board under the subdivision control law shall not be developed by the construction of dwelling units at a greater rate than permitted below. Subdivisions containing 8 or more building lots shall not be developed by the construction of dwelling units at a rate greater than 8 lots or 10% of the total number of lots shown on the approved definitive subdivision plan per year, whichever is greater. Planning board recommendation is deny. Phasing was established to give the town the opportunity to grow the capacity to provide services. The town cannot absorb a substantial number of new inhabitants implied by this development without adequate preparation time. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to proceed with further, or do you want to discuss 61?
You can go on to, if you want to go up into the next one's fine, because the next one goes on to jurisdiction. So if you want to wrap up the last one for this section, go ahead.
Sure. Waiver number 62, section 3600 of the zoning bylaws, earth removal. Waive the requirements of this section in its entirety to allow the project to be built as designed and permitted through the comprehensive permit process. Planning board comment is a special permit should be granted subject to conditions and criteria obtained by the Soil Commission.
Okay, perfect. Peter Williams.
I don't have any comment on that.
Here, Marguerite.
So the first one was with regards to the phasing plan, and that I know is being addressed through a condition, so it would be appropriate to waive that 2820. The
Yep.
earth removal piece, my understanding is that they need to get a permit through the zoning board of appeals in order to undertake earth removal. Perhaps that process has changed in Dayton.
No, it hasn't.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm not sure
you're
I'm
not allowed.
understanding if they're looking to not proceed to obtain a permit from the zoning board, or are they, I mean, there's conditions that you apply when you grant an earth removal permit.
I believe
Sorry,
Dayton
so-
doesn't allow us to take any kind of material out of town. This type of project, I feel you're gonna be bringing material in though, mostly. You need to build it up, if I'm not mistaken.
Attorney Augustine, if you want to go ahead and provide the clarification on that.
Yeah, so sometimes, and Greg, maybe you can help on this, but there's unsuitable material in certain areas that you have to take out and then replace with suitable fill for foundation purposes or for the development of stormwater infrastructure. So to the extent it's applicable, again, we've heard that several times throughout, we'd ask for a waiver of it. And then what would happen is, to the extent it's needed, the applicant would take its comprehensive permit and submit it to whatever agency, if it's the ZBA, normally issues an earth removal permit, and they would automatically issue the earth removal permit upon submission of the comprehensive permit. So for all intents and purposes, this permit is the earth removal permit. You are permitting us to do what is necessary to build this plan. And if it requires us to remove fill, contrary to the earth removal bylaw, we're asking for permission to do that now.
Would you be storing it in the town of Dayton, or would you taking it somewhere else?
Fisher? I mean, I don't know where the nearest,
It's not gonna be, I mean, there is not right now we're not planning on removing any soil from the site. What we're talking about is some hypothetical situation where all of a sudden we run into a pocket of peat or some loam or so that we cannot but remove it. But I don't anticipate that to happen. So no, I mean, it's nowhere in town. We're not going to be exporting it outside of town or in town. It's going to be on site. We're going to be hauling in a lot of material.
Yeah, hauling in, but when you're the material, Bishop, that you're gonna remove, and you're gonna try to utilize it on the site, not take it
Absolutely.
from Dayton.
Absolutely. We're going to be screening it and using it as loom on site. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So
Margaret, is that, oh, Deb?
I would just point out that your bylaw, your zoning bylaw says that there are certain provisions that you apply whenever you're dealing with an earth removal permit. So I don't know if the zoning board is interested in maybe before the next meeting, taking a look at that. It's on page 29 of your bylaw, and seeing if there's any concerns. If this permit is the grant of the earth removal permit, then all of those requirements, unless they're specified in the comprehensive permit, are being waived. And that's the part that I wanted to clarify for the zoning board. So
You know what? I would like to withdraw that. Let's not spend time on it. Don't give us waiver on that. Let's move on. Please.
Okay.
all right, you better not call me up and tell me that
I
you
won't.
need an earth removal permit.
I don't want.
I'm hanging up on you if you call me.
I won't. Let's move on, please. I'm done.
Go, Jonathan.
Sure.
I-
Waiver 63, Section 2, jurisdiction. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the zoning board of appeals will review these plans under 40B.
actually, Jonathan, this is a Conservation Commission regulations.
Okay.
I don't know why that wasn't right. Am I wrong? Greg, you prepared this document, but I think the planning board missed that reference. Or is this the zoning board regulations?
If you look at their reasoning, it says not applicable since the zoning board of appeals is the approving body under chapter 40B. The waiver is unnecessary. That's what planning board said for
Yeah,
that one.
but I think the planning board missed the fact that this was,
Well,
we're talking about the Concom regs now.
they decided to weigh in. Everyone's
Okay.
piling on.
Yeah, I think that this isn't part of the zoning board regulations anymore.
Okay. So,
So if we're going to
Jonathan,
start
wanna go on
talking
to the
about
next
this,
one?
my
Oh.
recommendation is you need to review the Concom letter first.
So we're gonna read that into
Okay.
record? Okay.
I don't know
Well-
if that's the steps we want to take. It's almost 9 o'clock, so I don't know if you want to
Well, we do,
start tackling that.
so all this is conservation from here on out.
Until,
For-
so
for the-
numbers 53 to 72 are Concom. And then in 73, you get to
Stormwater.
stormwater.
Now, let me ask you a question. Is anybody from Stormwater on right now?
I know I saw Nancy at one point.
Nancy is on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can skip, well, we do have.
Well, we also have the Conservation
We
Commission is
do,
on
I
as
was
well.
just gonna say that, yeah, so it's
Yeah.
totally up to you guys, I'll do whatever you want.
My suggestion, if the board will
Yeah.
have it, we have the conservation agent available. He's the author of that letter. If he could describe his concerns to the board, I don't think, it's anything we haven't already heard in connection with this project through the, prior hearings we had. But, if the board wants to hear from him directly, then perhaps we can go from there.
I'd rather do that than read the letter. I'll be to be honest with you, especially because it's posted and everything. So that being said, Charlie, are you still there?
We need to mute him, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Hold on.
Could I make a suggestion that you stop sharing your screen because we're no longer looking at the planning board provisions?
Sure.
That would help us.
Charlie Mello, you are on unmuted if you have any input here.
I can speak now or not
Yes.
speak?
Yeah. All set.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I noticed 63 through 72, the applicant wants to waive every part of the Conservation Commission's role in this application process. Everything is a waiver required for every 63 through 72. We would have no hearings. We would not be involved in this process at all, from what I can see. Am I correct?
Chris, you want to help him with that?
No, you're not correct, Charlie. We are waiving.
Yeah, I think, I heard everybody, this was everybody raising their hands all at once.
Yeah.
Mr. Mello, so
Yes.
this is a process, a Chapter 40B process comment. And, the group that's on this call has been involved in this for a little under a year now. So we're seasoned veterans of the process. But, to kind of bring you into the fold, the process is that the Conservation Commission can participate as far as its local concerns and local bylaws in this hearing before the zoning board. So if there are more stringent local bylaws, for instance, you point out in your letters that you're concerned about local jurisdictional vernal pools. If those
Correct.
types of concerns are of particular concern to the town, then the Conservation Commission could bring those to the attention of the zoning board, and then the zoning board can adjudicate whether or not it needs to take specific action relevant to those types of local jurisdictional resources. However, Chapter 40B does not trump the State Wetlands Protection Act, so the applicant still has to apply to the local Conservation Commission as the state permitting authority under the Wetlands Protection Act. However, in that process, the Conservation Commission only goes off of the State Wetlands Protection Act. We've asked for a waiver from the local bylaw so that we're not applying under the local Conservation Commission's requirements. So you are permitted to participate in this process, but we've asked for a waiver from more stringent local requirements so that we can build what's shown on the plan.
And we would like the zoning board of appeals to deny that waiver request because there are at least 3 potential vernal pools that are protected under our bylaw that probably will never function again after this development is built. And there are wetland problems on several other roads with water outfalls into wetlands. And there are some, at least one vernal pool in the wetland area that is a certified vernal pool that may be affected as well. We would like to have the zoning board of appeals allow us to implement a local bylaw to protect those resource areas, especially the potential vernal pools. The setbacks in our bylaw are different than the Wetland Act setbacks. And with those, there'd be a lot more protection for the vernal pools that right now are under threat. In one particular case, a road goes circles a vernal pool or potential vernal pool. It's walled. I mean, there's no way that that can function after the road is built right around a vernal pool. I'm very close to it. There's one other area where 2 homes will be built adjacent to a vernal pool. And again, there's no place for vertebrae and other habitat to go except backwards. And I don't know whether that's possible or not. And those are the sort of things that we would like to protect. That whole site has a plethora of vernal pools and wetland areas. And we would prefer to work with our bylaw and the Wetland Act.
Okay, is that all you have, Charlie, for now?
Yep.
Okay, so and then Attorney Augustine, if you want to address that.
Sure.
If there's any, yep, go ahead.
You know, and I know, you know, the board has heard a lot about environmental protection relative to this project design. One of the reasons we went about redesigning the project about a third of the way into the hearing process was try to preserve more open space in areas, less impervious area overall. And we also noted to the board that we are preserving in perpetuity substantial open space in all of those wetlands that are sort of down and to the left on the plan before the board. But these concerns that Mr. Mello is raising now have been concerns that we've heard since the beginning of the hearing process. And you know, to go back and redesign the project again a third time and you know, effectively doing an entire redesign at this stage doesn't take into account all the hard work that we've done to date to try to see how we can both balance the mandate of Chapter 40B and what are local restrictive bylaws that you know, prevent the development of housing versus these local concerns. So we think we've balanced those local concerns, and we think the board under the mandate of Chapter 40B has to take that into account. And that's why the applicant should be, in this case, entitled to a waiver of the local bylaw.
Well, of course, I don't agree, but your opinion and mine are not the same.
Okay. So it being said, stormwater. I mean, unless there's any discussion amongst the board, I'm sorry first before we turn it over to stormwater.
Go ahead. I want to ask Charlie one more thing.
Go ahead, Greg.
I'm looking at the page. I don't know if you have a drawing set in front of you, Charlie, but it's page 4,
I don't
page
know.
5. I'm lifting them up and down, and I'm looking at where the vernal pools. Which is the one that you're most concerned with? I know I'm looking at what I see on this, where the developer is designed around at about 5.
Well, I don't have a plan before me, but there's a short street that completely encompasses a potential vernal pool.
That'd be the cottages. The cottages,
yes.
that's what I'm seeing, yeah.
And there's no way that that's going to function as a potential vernal pool or a vernal pool. Under our bylaw, it is a vernal pool. Under the wetland regulations, it's a potential vernal pool. And it doesn't have any protection except its boundaries. And the way that plan is drawn right at the moment, the boundaries look like it's a stone wall right around the vernal pool.
Yeah, it's right on the
Vernal
street.
pools,
Yeah.
yes. frogs and different vertebrae don't climb over stone walls. They might be able to get under one if it had an opening, but there's no way for them to breed and then return back to a natural habitat with that design. That's just crazy.
Yeah, Greg, I believe he's referring to Blueberry Lane, the one that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, that's where he's talking. That's where I see.
Yep.
Some of the homes are like right on the spot. The street takes one of them. They
There's
dedicate.
probably 3, maybe 4 homes in that particular cul-de-sac.
Yeah, we're proposing, some connections with some pipes through there. We can enhance that as we go through the Concom process and see, get like a crossing for the wildlife.
So if that is, Greg Driscoll, not something that would require a complete redesign, Mr. Mello, that's the type of, if it's an accommodation that could be made by the applicant, a specific local concern, to say that, we'd waive the bylaw, but the zoning board, could impose a condition that would require, one wildlife tunnel or duct under the roadway as an accommodation, just to try to preserve some of it. But you're correct that under the State Wetlands Protection Act, it's not protected. And these are exactly the types of local bylaws that 40B mandates are waived.
In that particular instance, I don't have a plan before me, but I can't see any way that a pipe would let vertebrae and other
Hello?
Excuse me. Yep, no,
Yep,
I just
yep.
had a little.
No.
I don't think a pipe would be helpful. It's surrounded by houses, streets. There are no wetland, no open wooded areas anywhere in front or behind or beside that particular vernal pool or potential vernal pool.
So what we're
That's
showing
the
is,
only way that could function as a vernal pool, an active and healthy situation would be no houses around it. And under our bylaw, that would be the case. Because a vernal pool under a town bylaw, the 100-foot buffer zone is the vernal pool. That would eliminate 3, maybe 4 houses. Then it would be able to get to some wooded area on the, I believe, would be the west side of the potential homes. So that's a lost cause.
Yeah, now that's that is, when you're talking about eliminating 3, maybe 4 homes for the enforcement of a local bylaw that is deemed inconsistent or presumed inconsistent with local needs. I think, Mr. Mello, the idea that we're preserving a large amount of other space on the site, even though it's all wetland, that's the accommodation we made. And we talked about that very early on in the process. So, this isn't something that's going to cause the applicant to redesign the site at this stage. The Concom received a copy of these plans during the process and was welcome to comment. And, we did do our best to preserve what we could.
No comment.
Okay. Is there anybody amongst the board that has any comments regarding this, or you guys feel confident that we can move on to stormwater? Marguerite, I guess, and Peter, if you have anything else you can have any input on this, feel free, but.
Mr. Chair, we did have a raised hand from Attorney Dennis Murphy.
Thank you. So just really quick, Attorney Murphy, is it regarding the Concom? If not, I'm going to go into stormwater and then I can turn to you, unless, like I said, your comment is directly in regard to this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was directly in regard to the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Just briefly, Attorney Agostino mentioned that the elimination of a few houses would not be acceptable to the applicant. I wanted the board to be aware that you have the ability to require the applicant to show you that if you complied with certain local protections, like preserving that vernal pool, it would make the project uneconomic. Now, we've been traveling along a road that's been very collaborative and cooperative. And I think this is a point where if the board felt strongly about honoring the request of the Conservation Commission, it could at least ask the engineer and the applicant to show them why they can't comply with the request of the conservation agent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Zach, can I say something?
Yep, go ahead.
Charlie
Oh, yep, go ahead.
Mello,
Yep.
is this your only objection?
Well, there were another vernal pool on another road where 2 homes are going to be built. That's probably will allow the natural species that habitat the pool to move, to have some movement. But this particular one is just a horrible thing.
I think you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Did you
It's
hear
all
me?
right.
It's okay. So
Okay.
it's just the Blueberry Lane that's your biggest concern?
There's Blueberry Lane. There's another potential vernal pool that's has homes to be built on either side, but there's a little bit more room for the natural habitat to move around in that particular instance. But this
Right.
one is a lost cause.
Okay.
And to be fair, early on, the project was only 96 units, and it's well over that now. So the pain of losing 2 or 3 homes shouldn't be too much for Mr. Bishop to bear.
Okay.
Uh,
I have no other questions, Zach.
it was just that, just wanting to know what Charlie's objection was.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so
Mr.
without
Chairman.
further ado, we will. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, we've had this conversation with Attorney Agostino several times. He's correct that what the zoning board has the authority to do is to waive the local bylaws. If there's a particular provision of the comprehensive or the Conservation Commission local bylaws that addresses this particular concern of the vernal pools on Blueberry Lane, it may be helpful to know exactly which ones might be the area of concern here. Because that way you can have a final decision made on that end of it. Attorney Murphy is not incorrect when he indicates that if the applicant is advising that something would create an economic hardship for them, that they would need to provide evidence of that. I'm just not positive that's exactly what they're saying to you right now. I don't know if that's the argument or not. And maybe if we got into the very specific provisions of the local bylaw, the waivers are fairly general in nature. And it's unclear to me which, if we were to address the concern around Blueberry Lane, which of these local bylaw provisions would need to stay in place?
That's what I feel too, and especially because unfortunately with the letter being submitted when it was, I don't think it's really fair for us to make any kind of decision on that right now. Would you agree?
For tonight, at least,
Yeah.
perhaps that there could be some more specificity provided by either Mr. Mello tonight or in a subsequent letter that he submits, the Conservation Commission submits. I think to the extent that there hadn't been comments made earlier. I know Mr. Mello had shown up at earlier public hearings. And I know there were a couple of iterations of plans that were going around. So, you know, I think that comments from the Conservation Commission and many of these boards were provided as timely as possible once, I mean, we received updated waiver requests right around the time that they provided these comments. So I don't know that it's inappropriate for the board to spend time hearing from the Conservation Commission right now on this, particularly when you're dealing with specific areas of the design that is of concern to the local board. I think, to be fair to you doing your diligence, you know, if it was just a straight across the board statement, we don't want you to waive any of our local provisions, then that's harder for the zoning board to really understand because you're not hearing something specific. But when you're talking about specific areas and the rationale why and which particular provisions, I think that that's appropriate for you to listen to right now.
Okay. So that being said, we'll go right into stormwater. So I believe we have Nancy Goulart on the phone, the call. Nancy, I assume you have some stuff you want to address?
Yes. Could Jonathan please bring up the list, just starting, just where stormwater starts? I don't have it in front of me because I was on that DR budget thing and I got budget stuff here. So I just need Jonathan to bring that up so I can see the numbers.
Sure. Do we know what approximate numbers?
Where does stormwater start?
75.
Actually, I think it's 73.
Board of Health Stormwater Bylaw, 73. Yep.
Okay, so on the 20th of this month, we did have a meeting, a Stormwater Committee, and we discussed some of the concerns. It was left in general terms that rather than us requesting that we go through every one of these, that the consensus was that the Stormwater Committee would draft a letter, and I'm going to draft the letter and circulate it to the committee. And then once I get input from them, we will send that letter to Chris so that he can look at it. What we were hoping to accomplish was that instead of, like our letter had said, don't waive anything, we were thinking we could come to some kind of consensus with this, I'll call it a joint letter from the Stormwater Committee and the representative of the developer, that the developer would follow Wetlands Protection Act and order of conditions from the Concom, so forth and so on. Haven't gotten the latest letter from the Concom. I had not seen the one that was issued back in February, but I've got the one in front of me for May 26th. And now that I've seen that all in writing and listened to this discussion tonight, I'm sitting here thinking, what am I going to put into this letter? Because the Stormwater Committee was willing to, if you will, say to the ZBA, well, we're going to withdraw our recommendation that you deny everything because we've reached this agreement with the developer and his representatives. But if the basis for that letter of agreement, which would have the Stormwater Committee withdraw its request to deny everything, is going to be based on Conservation Commission order of conditions, Wetland Protection Act, so forth and so on. And I'm looking at this letter and listening to Mr. Mello tonight, I'm thinking, I've got to know what's going to happen with the Concom, because we'd be basing our mutual decision with the developer based on the Concom. So it would appear to me that if the Concom has some concerns, those need to be worked out so that we know what the ZBA is going to do about the Concom requests or recommendations. And then we can certainly put together something. But if there, if the enforcement from the Concom under the local bylaws or the Wetlands Protection Act or other issues that have been raised tonight, if that's not going to be enforced, then we've got to go back and say, wait a minute, we don't want you to waive everything. So
May I interrupt, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
And Ms. Goulart, thank you for taking time tonight. I know you were at multiple hearings, so you're bouncing from budget work to stormwater management to Conservation Commission issues. So I just, to bring you up to speed as far as what we were just discussing, the letter from the Conservation Commission focused on the protection of vernal pools and the local bylaw. The discussion that we had with the Stormwater Management Committee last week said that if the applicant gets an order of conditions or a superseding order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act with regard to stormwater management, so we apply with a stormwater management form when we file our notice of intent, and we obtain an order of conditions that covers stormwater management, that would satisfy the Stormwater Committee as to stormwater issues. Okay, that doesn't have anything to do with the protection of the vernal pool that we were just discussing towards the back of the site. So we can't, and the applicant, as you know, spent a lot of time and effort to go to that meeting last week and had me be there as well. So we want to make it clear that we can't keep going in circles here and have one board waiting for another board. You know, it was frustrating listening or just seeing the Concom's letter as it was, because this plan has been in existence for months now. But to clarify what my understanding was, and we can go back to the videotape when we had the discussion with the Stormwater Committee, is that an order of conditions under the State Wetlands Protection Act covers issues like balancing pre and post development runoff, water quality as it discharges into wetlands. All of those issues are going to be taken care of. The Concom is not waiving any of those issues. All we're asking the Concom to waive is the more stringent local bylaw that has an expansive or potentially expansive definition of vernal pool, which would put a buffer zone around depressions on the site that are not protected under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Was
So
this matter discussed before I joined the meeting? It was probably 8:10 or so. Was the Concom letter discussed earlier in the meeting?
nope, it was just discussed now. What you
So
heard.
what
was
I
it.
just heard is the first discussion of the letter and what Mr. Mello has stated as their position.
It's about vernal pools.
Right, I understand that. But going back to the stormwater meeting, when we talked about order of conditions and the Wetlands Protection Act, my understanding was the order of conditions would be issued by the local Conservation Commission in compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. Isn't that what we agreed to?
And that's absolutely stands. Nothing has changed. We're
Okay.
not asking for a waiver of the Wetlands Protection Act.
No, I know that.
The
and
local I'm not sure, the local Conservation Commission wears two hats. They wear a local permitting authority hat and they wear a state permitting authority hat. Okay? We're taking their local permitting authority hat and we're giving it to the zoning board. They still wear their state permitting authority hat. That's the hat that the Stormwater Committee is concerned with. That's the hat that they're going to continue to wear. And that if wearing that hat, they issue an order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act, the Stormwater Committee is satisfied per their bylaw. An order of conditions will issue for the development of this property. So we cannot go back on that. We've spent too much time discussing that and we thought we had a good resolution. So if we're looking for something beyond an order of conditions issued under the State Wetlands Protection Act for stormwater management, I don't know what else we can offer you.
Well, first of all, I didn't say we were going to go back. I'm raising the issue. That's why I asked if the letter had been discussed prior to my coming to the meeting tonight. The answer was no. You heard the discussion. I heard what Mr. Mello said about vernal pools. My concern is that the order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act is, I'll call it the governing document we talked about, correct?
Correct.
All right. It appears to me that there may be other concerns here that Concom has, that if, whether it's part and parcel or connected to somehow the Wetlands Protection Act, then we aren't going to say, this is a blanket waiver of everything. I'm not looking to go back and start over again, okay? But
I'm sorry, can you
recognize-
repeat? I don't understand what you just described. Could you please repeat that? Because I lost you there.
What we had agreed to in consensus at the Stormwater Committee meeting was the Stormwater Committee would draft a letter, send it off to you. There would be conditions in it that would, both parties, you, the representative, the developer, and the Stormwater Committee would have an agreement on, these are the things that we would agree to advise the ZBA that we were withdrawing our original recommendation of don't allow, deny all of your requests. We're trying to eliminate that, okay? Because everything you asked for, we said deny it. So now we're trying to eliminate all of that discussion, item by item by item. That's what we're trying to do. What I'm saying to you is, what our consensus was, that the order of conditions that will be, I'll call it the governing document, would be issued by the Conservation Commission. And that's what would be enforced relative to concerns of the Stormwater Committee. Isn't that what we agreed to? In consensus. I mean, we haven't put it in writing yet, but.
There was a lot in that statement, and I you know, what we agreed to was if the applicant obtains an order of conditions under the State Wetlands Protection Act that governs and shows compliance with the stormwater management regulations of the DEP.
EPA.
No, well, that's the
DP, you keep saying that. EPA is the umbrella. The state follows the feds. The town follows the feds. So it's the
Okay.
EPA. They're the umbrella.
If you comply with the stormwater management regulations, you comply with the requirements of the EPA, okay?
Exactly.
So if we get an order of conditions from, or a superseding order of conditions that governs stormwater management for this project and shows compliance with the stormwater management regulations, then that will control. And we talked about, you would issue a waiver of the local stormwater management bylaw contingent on the applicant getting an order of conditions under the state stormwater management regulations. That remains the case.
When you say you would issue the waiver, no, the Stormwater Committee would notify the ZBA. They would be the ones that would issue the waiver to in
Correct.
compliance with whatever our mutual agreement is, a mutual agreement between the developer and the Stormwater Committee. What I'm saying is, I'm just looking at this letter and I'm reading both of them. And I realized that some of the discussion tonight was strictly local bylaws. And I also hope that we can get this resolved, because I'm not looking for another legal battle. I remember the last one. But I also think I've got to get this letter out to my committee members. I want to draft something that I think has a chance of getting approved both by the Stormwater Committee and by the developer. The other thing is, in those list of waivers you've requested, if you think about all the waivers, if you take all the ones that will be covered by a order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act and set those aside, I believe one of the things that you've also requested a waiver of is the stormwater fees. That is something we won't agree to. That's not covered under the Stormwater Protection Act. The stormwater permit fees is a whole different thing. And that is meant to provide for the inspections and things that have to be done. I mean, I can't expect the town of Dayton to bear the burden of that.
So we pay for inspections separately. All of that is covered under the 40B process. So, you know, we paid a 40B application fee for a comprehensive permit. So we would also fund a construction monitor for this project under the comprehensive permit. We're not going to have a separate, and we talked about at the hearing, I do recall, we did discuss at the hearing that the Stormwater Committee can suggest to the ZBA that the stormwater agent or, you know, whoever can participate in those reviews, but we're not going to fund a separate stormwater agent for the Stormwater Committee. We're not going to have 6 different agents reviewing the project.
And we never talked about 6 agents. We did, there is a stormwater permit fee that the town collects for stormwater projects that require them. And I
It's
mentioned the
subsumed, this is subsumed within the 40B application.
if the amount of money is significant and it's based on what we've charged others for stormwater permits, that's a whole nother issue. But what we also talked about when we were talking about inspectors, we talked about the importance of having people inspect certain areas of the project who were truly qualified to do it. And what I said to you and what I thought we had consensus on was that Stormwater Committee is made up of 6 individuals, so a quorum is 3. There could never be 3 people involved anywhere as far as any kind of inspections. And what we said is, for the most part, it may be one person looking at a certain thing. But then if that person determined that he needed another member from the committee to look at it, a second person might be involved, but there would never be more than 2. By the same token, if neither of those 2 had the expertise that was needed in a particular area, those 2 might not be involved and it could be another one. But in no case would there be more than 2 people initially. And we would discuss the reasons why, if member A from the Stormwater Committee was looking over some operations, and that member A says, you know what, this is getting into an area that I'm not expertise in. We agreed that maybe member B or C could come in, all right? But that is all relevant to what is occurring and what the particular individual feels is within their realm of expertise, okay? We did agree to that too. Again, we agreed in consensus. We've got to put it in writing. My next step is, I mean, this is the first time I've had a chance to speak to the ZBA, and certainly the project, the whole thing was taped, so they can, if they have a chance, they can watch it on YouTube. I believe it's on YouTube right now. They can see that whole meeting. But certainly, when the meeting ended, I thought we had some consensus there, and I think we still do. But I'm certainly going to make sure that our committee sees those 2 letters, because this is the first time I've seen them tonight. So I certainly wouldn't hold those to myself and not share them with my committee. I'm still planning to go ahead with drafting something that I feel comes out of the meeting that our committee will look at. If they have anything to add or subtract, we'll come up with a draft document and get it off to you. I don't see this holding up anything as far as this. I think this could save us time. But I specifically mentioned that you said 6 inspectors. No, there were never 6 inspectors. 2 was max at any time, and it would only be if needed because of expertise.
Okay, so we'll await any further communication from you, Nancy, written correspondence.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, so the plan is that we will get this drafted. I will get it out to the committee and have them give the feedback to Roz so we don't violate any open meeting laws or anything else. And once we get it back, I'll put it together in a hopefully final draft and get it off to Chris so that they can look at it and see what they want to add or delete or whatever. The hope and the plan is that when we come back to the ZBA, we will have this resolved so that we can say to the ZBA, okay, this is what we came up with. We talked about the order of conditions, so forth and so on. And we're willing to say to the ZBA, the initial letter said deny everything. well, now we're saying, this is what we want to propose to you. So I think I'm trying to save time here, but
Yep.
I'm also not going to cede the authority of the Stormwater Committee.
Yep, I understand that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep, no problem. So, Carrie or John, is there anything else? Has anything come in for public input? I'm just looking at the time. We're nearing 10 o'clock, so we gotta start to wrap this up. Is there anything else from the new from the public, I should say, that we haven't heard from that came in?
Mr. Chairman,
Yep, go ahead.
Joe Pacheco here.
Yep.
I got a couple of comments that I'd like to make, and it has to do with Article 32, and it's Section 4212, access to adjacent property.
Okay.
And previously, I was the chairman on the last developer that tried to develop something here.
Yeah.
And there is some right of way through there, or ancient way or something. And that's all. And I have no personal interest in that, but I've
Yep.
had people reach out to me about that. That's the question. And the other thing I have is like in Article 62 and 3600 bylaw, earth removal. And we've run into trouble on the police station about earth removal.
Okay.
The developer sold some soil to another party, and I don't know how it was resolved now, but it is a concern.
Okay.
Mr. Pacheco, I just want to clarify, the waivers you discussed were 62, and what was the other one?
Well, it was Article 32, and it's
Okay.
bylaw 4212,
Okay, thank you. I got it.
and then it's item 62 and bylaw 3600.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Just a comment. What happened with the police station? The ground was broken and the contractor assumed that whatever they moved and didn't need, they had the right to sell. Well, they started to have soil removed, and it was brought to the attention of the Board of Selectmen, and we immediately ordered them to stop doing it, because if there is surplus,
Right.
I'll call it surplus soil on property, whether it is town property or private property, the practice has been, well, if it's on town property, the town gets first dibs on it. If we don't have any use for it, then we can talk about it being sold, but it's not donated and given away. And then if a developer has, or a construction company has, I'll call it surplus soil, the practice has been, can the town of Dayton use this? Because if you can use it, we'll truck it to the site and leave it. So
Yep.
that's just something else that goes on in town, okay? And what
Mr.
happened with the rest of the soil from the police station project? Once we told them to stop removing it, all of the soil from that point on was given to the town and stockpiled.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
I appreciate that information. I believe the developer did withdraw this waiver request
Right.
tonight. So that isn't going to be a concern
Right.
now. They'll have
Thank
to
you.
comply with the earth removal requirements
Right.
for the town.
Thank you for that, Marguerite. It's too long ago. All right. So, Jonathan and Carrie, anything come through?
Nothing via email. Carrie, anything via phone?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe we have any more
Easy night for
members.
Carrie.
Any more members on of the public on the phone that we haven't addressed. So that being said, let's figure out the next meeting for this. What's everyone? Marguerite, obviously you said Wednesdays are tough for you.
Yeah, Wednesdays and the first and the third Thursdays of the month are tough for me.
And then in terms of running into our next regular meeting, if we will be meeting before that, I would hope, so that won't be a factor. What is everyone thinking going forward for the next meeting? I'm pretty much flexible for whatever, so. just a reminder, today is the 26th. Tuesday, so. I mean, are we looking for next week? Does anyone feel like that we need a little farther out, or what are we thinking?
Well, we have to wait for a few things from Stormwater to write up their letter, how quick she can get that over. I feel I'm open next week if Stormwater thinks they can get that letter out. And then I'm open the following week. The only day I'm not is Monday.
That's fine. So as long as it's not Thursday, the 4th of June, because that would be the first Thursday of the month, so that wouldn't work for Marguerite. So, you said Greg, you said not Monday.
I can't do Monday, but I can do any other day.
All right. I mean, a week from today, Tuesday the 2nd. Is that too soon? Is that good?
Mr. Chair, I just probably should point out, we do have some other business for the ZBA. I've been focusing quite a bit on Strawberry Fields, but there is some other business, so it might be difficult for me to pull all the strings together for our other business and Strawberry Fields for next week. But I can certainly manage if that's the way.
It doesn't matter to me, guys. If you then I guess what would the next week be? That would be the 7th to the 13th.
I'm open.
That's fine. So do you guys want to?
Can we do the 9th?
Go ahead.
The 9th?
The 9th, is that what?
Is that easier for me?
Marguerite.
That works for me.
That works for you. Cable, if you're able to give us feedback on that, does that work for you guys in 9th?
Both sitting cable members can be here.
Okay.
What would this be, a 7 o'clock, or would this be pushed up like previous meetings?
No,
meetings has started at 6.
No, I know. Even today was the 7 o'clock, and that was even tough because of a meeting before us. But Marguerite said that with there are enough people still working that doing it earlier is unfortunately cutting it close for a lot of people to have any kind of sanity right now. So I would say we're probably going to stick with the 7 o'clock.
Sounds good.
All right. So seeing as there's no immediate.
Zach. Excuse me, Zach, just so you know, I'm sorry, Zach, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I won't be able to make the 9th. I don't know how important that is, considering, my phone's ringing off the hook, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make you aware that I am not available on the 9th.
Zach, this is also Jonathan Gale. I didn't hear the developer confirm.
No, I know. I want to get the discussion amongst the board first, just to make sure. I mean, Marguerite, I don't think that's an issue, right? With not having anybody. I don't know what Mallory, John has Mallory.
So,
I know that was kind of Mallory's kind of idea with that in place. Do you think she'll be opposed to that?
So I can discuss with Mallory, but I think worst case we could probably find a different person to be able to provide that. And I mean, I'll just say additionally, since we're getting so few public input. When someone phones into the office, I get an email message. So to some extent, I could probably handle both the phone, and I would not be able to. What I would not be able to do is actually pick up a phone and talk to a person, but I would be able to get a notification of generally what they said in a voicemail. So.
And worst comes to absolute worst, Jonathan, depending on what capacity the town hall has opened up by that point, if at all. I'm not opposed to this. If you and I are 6 feet apart, obviously, in defining what the town has in place, I don't mind being in the office with you. I mean, you and I are not 2 members, so that's not going to be an issue. If you feel like that might help, I have no problem doing that, assuming the town is okay with that. When the time comes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure we can find. I'm sure we can find a solution given the time.
I'm sure. So that being said, going to the developer is the Tuesday the 9th. Does that work for you guys?
Yes. Fisher?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm free that night.
Works for me.
Peter Williams, all set for you?
Works for me.
Excellent. Okay, so do I have a motion to continue the public hearing?
Mr. Chairman,
Sorry, to remind her to state your name for roll call voting.
Mr. Chairman, this is Michelle Lima. I make a motion to move the next meeting for Strawberry Fields to Tuesday, June 9th at 7 p.m.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, Greg Logan.
Any discussion?
Is it going to be a virtual meeting?
That's up to the town, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we can find out that we can possibly do this in public, I mean, I'm not opposed to discussing that, but as far as I know, there's no set concrete date or plan for opening meetings. I know that some boards are talking about it, but obviously ours is going to be more than 10 people, I would imagine. I think that's the limit
I
right
think
now.
we're going to discuss it
So that
at the Selectmen's meeting tomorrow night.
Okay.
We have 18 people participating on this right now as we speak.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, like, go ahead. Is someone talking? I can't really hear, sorry. So that being said, I mean, I'm not opposed to leaving that part up in the air until we get kind of confirmation from the town. But I would say, if not, well, yes, it would be held remotely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think we should let the public know who's watching that it will be a virtual public hearing, just so we don't have any confusion.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, the one after that, you know, who knows? But I would say for the 9th, yes. So that being said, if you want to, Michelle, just clarify your motion.
Chairman, I'm just clarifying the motion that it will be a Zoom meeting.
2 minutes.
Featured,
Can you take my iPhone cord out over there? Did you already?
Yeah.
You did? Where'd you put it?
Oh, no.
Someone's not muted. Sorry, Michelle, continue.
The Zoom meeting. Okay, so may I redo my motion for to do a televised on YouTube meeting for Strawberry Fields on Tuesday, June 9th at 7 p.m.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman,
Discussion?
Greg Logan.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just quickly, so the goal for the next meeting, just to try to plan ahead, would be to complete the discussion of the waiver requests.
Yep, that's how I feel. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we have the vote to continue the public hearing. Is there any more very, very quick comments or questions before we adjourn? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Greg, is that you making the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn. Greg Logan.
Is there a second?
This is Michelle Lima. I second the motion to adjourn.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Jonathan Gale, if you're still there, good luck with everything with your family, okay?
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's going to be a long night.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.